Alright, it's time for Wildfire Insider. I think this is going to be a pretty important one today because when we were talking last night, it looked like there was kind of some high fire danger coming in on Saturday. Doesn't look as hot and as dry as it could be, which is good news, but it does look like our winds are going to be coming up. So I think that's one of the key things we're going to look at throughout the day today. Try to figure out just how windy it's going to be and if those models have changed at all since we looked at it yesterday. And then we're also going to look at what's the good news part of that system coming into California, which is the chance of rain. So that's kind of the big story we're going to be talking about. It's this big trough right here that's going to be moving into California. When that first comes in, it's bringing gusty winds, which will be most likely bad for the Mosquito fire. But then eventually, it's going to bring some rainfall, which could be good for the Mosquito fire. But before we really dive into the weather, we should probably just figure out exactly what's going on the Mosquito fire. And best place to start there is to look at the acres. Looks like we're at 69,908 acres. So let's see how much that increased since last night. Looks like my last Twitter post said 67,000 acres. So that doesn't mean we grew 2,000 acres overnight. It most likely just means that they ran another flight, got more accurate data, and then were able to kind of update the map. Or they did so many firing operations that our acreage burned actually did go up because they put some fire on the ground overnight. So, or there's always the chance that there also was just activity overnight. But given our conditions, I wouldn't exactly expect that to be true. So what we can do to try to figure out where some of that growth was over the last 24 hours is to look at our map here. Just to orient ourselves, we got Forest Hill on the west side of this fire. We got Georgetown, Michigan Bluff up here, and then something we did yesterday that I know people enjoyed was measure how far away it is from Tahoe. So let's go to the closest point of the fire, which looks to be right about there. To that point in Tahoe looks about 23 miles away. To Homewood looks about 21 miles away. So we have a pretty good distance between the fire and Tahoe right now. And although fire weather conditions are going to get more challenging on Saturday, it doesn't look like extreme fire conditions where we grow more than 10,000 acres in a day. At least as of the information we were finding yesterday. So we'll have to check out that weather forecast to see if it's still true. Now first, let's just try to figure out where some of that growth was yesterday. Best way to do that is turn on and off the data that we have from today. So I noticed a few things here. One, I noticed this little red dot down here by Forest Hill. I also noticed some growth on this eastern side. And then I also noticed this little circle up here being connected on the northern edge of the fire. So if we click all those on and off, you can see where that growth was just in the last 24 hours. So let's just take those one by one. First, let's go down to Forest Hill. Now, I was just watching the CAL FIRE kind of morning briefing. It's a 3-minute video where they talk about kind of the fire management and operations going on this fire. And they said that this was a firing operation down here. And you can see why they did it. So right there, and I could actually zoom way down into it, that's the Middle Fork American River. So what they wanted to do was basically connect where the fire had burned in the past to the Middle Fork American River. That way, there wasn't just all this, if we turn off that firing operation, you have all this unburned fuel right here. So there's the possibility for the fire to just take off through here. Now, when they clear out some of the fuels, that ties it in with the river. Hopefully it doesn't jump the river again like it did to create this spot fire in the first place. But right now we're looking good on this side, and just especially looking good around Forest Hill, which did have that spot fire that came so close to it just a couple of days ago. Amazing that the work that they did on that side of the fire when that spot fire was going up there. So looking pretty good right there. We also just had some cool, moist conditions yesterday, so we didn't see that much growth on, or even activity on that side of the fire. Where we were seeing the most activity yesterday, we'll orient ourselves back towards north here, was this eastern side again. And that's kind of been the story every single day, because we get those southwesterly winds in the afternoon. You can also just see how rugged this terrain is in here, very steep. Fire likes to go uphill. But it's been those southwesterly winds that pick up, push that fire towards the northeast. So just on this eastern side, let's see where some of the growth was there. Yeah, we had some, but not all that much, and that's for a number of reasons. They've been doing more work on this side of the fire, which is great news. And yeah, our winds were not that bad yesterday. Temperatures, not that bad. Humidity, not that bad. But that is where there is some concern for the future, because a few of those factors are going to be turning around on Saturday. And as we looked yesterday, a couple of those will be turning around today. So at first kind of prediction for this fire, just based on yesterday's information, it does look like today is going to be a harder fire day than yesterday. But finally, just going up to this northern section, to just the casual eye, this looks pretty weird up here. You might wonder how the fire just did this big circle, but that's because they were actually putting fire on the ground to clear out the fuels in this area to stop any more progress of this fire going north. So what they basically did is put fire on the ground, burnt out this whole section right here, and then now they're connecting it in right here too. And then on the other side of this, we have the American burn scar. So if we want to see that, we can go back here, and you can see kind of their strategy here. So they're clearing out a lot of this fuel on the northern side because they know the big wind event is going to try to push this fire towards the north. And then when we tie it in with fire history, we've got the 2013 American. So now I would say we're looking great on this northern side. A lot of this fuel purposely cleared out, so there's not as much fuel for that fire to continue to grow. And then all over here we have the 2013 American burn scar. Some of the fuels would have burned back in this area. For example, it looks like the fire did push into the burn scar right there, but it's definitely less fuel and less dead fuel especially than if that burn scar wasn't there, which even if the fire can go through there, it's going to be burning more slowly. And what was interesting that we noticed yesterday is it actually looks like on Google Earth, you can see where some of that fuel has been cleared out. So for example, in here, you have all that green vegetation, but then when you look at where the burn scar is, looks like a lot of those mountains are pretty bare, which, I mean, I don't know how often they update these satellites, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty often. And it matches this pretty well to make it look like a lot of those fuels have burned out. So overall, looking pretty good on the Mosquito fire right now. The big question mark though is what's going to happen with the weather throughout the day today. So before we get to the weather, I do just want to actually continue to try to figure out exactly what's going on the ground on this fire. Good place to start is looking at the satellite imagery. Now the first thing I notice, you probably noticed this too, is that we have, let's switch this to 20 to 48, so we're in the dark less. First thing I noticed, there's a lot of smoke that just settled down overnight. So what happens there is you get all that smoke billowing up towards the north during the day, because we have those kind of southerly, southwesterly winds, and then overnight, those winds just completely die down, so then the smoke settles down to the surface. That's why a lot of times your air quality, especially in the mornings, is just terrible, because, yeah, imagine when the fire is producing all that smoke, it's going up into the atmosphere, then those winds die, and all that smoke just settles down to the surface where you're breathing. So that makes it a lot more unhealthy. And if we just look at our air quality right now, it doesn't look as bad as yesterday. But we definitely do have that unhealthy to even very unhealthy area stretching over Lake Tahoe. And then looks like we still have that unhealthy area over Reno. I've heard a lot of reports from people in Reno saying that the air quality has just been terrible. And it makes perfect sense because our fires right here, we've had southwesterly winds just pushing that smoke directly into Reno. So, sorry, Nevada. But so looking at the smoke again, there's two things that could happen throughout the day today. when it comes to this smoke. Now, so I see Frank's on, one of our great moderators. He says, quite the mosaic, landscape, fire scars, timber harvest. Yeah, there's a lot of different things going on here. When you look at all this fire history, that's where some of the good news does come in on that northern side, and then also even that southern side too. I believe they're doing firing operations down here to connect it to this fire as well. The one area where we don't see all that much fire history is right on the eastern side right here, so that's why every day that's the area where I've been forecasting the most growth, because it's the combination of those southwesterly winds, steep topography, and lack of fire history where a lot of these fuels haven't been burned out in a very long time. But back to what I was just saying here. So another Frank says, Holt, great reporting as usual. Are there any structures in the immediate path of the fire? So best thing that we can do, we'll try to figure it out on here first, and then we'll check out maybe Google Earth. So if we zoom out on the fire, let's turn on structures, or we'll flash them so everybody can see where they are. So we do have a lot of structures still around this Forest Hill area. That's why when I watched that CAL FIRE briefing this morning, they said their number one priority is still the Forest Hill area. And it makes sense because that spot fire took off just a couple of days ago and was rushing towards all of these structures up here. And we do still have a lot more to the west. But that's where we have some really good news. We had minimal activity on this side of the fire over the last 2 days with all that moisture and cool air that we've had. And then where you see that activity right there, you might think that's bad news because still some fire on the ground. There will still be some smoke coming off of that part of the fire today, but that's actually a firing operation so while that might look like bad news, it's actually good news because they were able to put some fire on the ground and connect that part of the fire where a lot of these fuels have now been burned out with the Middle Fork American River, just to try to kind of tie in this side right there. So when it comes to those structures, I don't want to jump the gun because it looks like we have some challenging weather on Saturday, but right now we're looking a lot better than we were just a couple of days ago. Now the other part of the fire where we have the largest amount of structures is around this pocket right here, and you notice the fire just went directly up against there. I should first say, I believe when it comes to structures, we've had, last I saw was over 60 destroyed. When I was working at KSBW last night, I think I remember one of the packages we ran said that. So, as always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by this fire. Now, with that being said, luckily we've got some good news when it comes to all these structures around there. That's the part of the fire that's just looking the best. We haven't seen any activity down there recently, or this northern edge where you see those structures too. And when we look at the containment map, see our containment went up. Still at 20% containment. But when we look at the containment map, it's right around that southern edge where you see all those structures that the perimeter is black, meaning they're not expecting any more growth right there. And then on that northern section that I also pointed out, that is now turned black as well. Just looking at this map, it's interesting that they're calling it 10% or 20% contained, because just looking at it, I don't know, let me know in the live chat, but the percentage of the perimeter that looks black to me, and I don't know, I would just guess like 40% or something, but when you look at this side, it's almost kind of like the coast of Norway, where it's not just a straight line, there's all these little ins and outs. So then the overall perimeter over here might actually just, if you were to stretch that out in a straight line, it'd be much, much longer, just like the Norwegian coast. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. We were also just looking at, the structures, right? So looking good over on this side. I am going to still keep an eye on Forest Hill though, just because CAL FIRE says that's the top priority. I would agree with that, just considering how many structures are there and some of that activity that we had 2 days ago. Now if we come over here, I'd say the area of the fire where I'm expecting the most growth throughout the day today is still this area where we don't have that fire history, and those southwesterly winds will be pushing it forward. Now if we click in here, let's just go fire perimeter to clean this map up a little bit. And let's turn off fire history. We do see a few structures in here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, there's a few structures on this eastern side. So yeah, there are still some structures threatened by this, and I'd imagine the official CAL FIRE report probably has the number of structures threatened in the thousands. But where we're seeing the most growth, or where we're expecting the most growth, there's not nearly as many structures on the Forest Hill side. So let's actually zoom in here and see if we can. Yeah, it looks like there might be a few structures over there, but certainly not as much. Now, some people were concerned about the Placer County Big Trees Grove. Does look like, oh, I never noticed that. So it looks like, you might think that's a spot fire, but I wonder if they're actually just starting to put some fire on the ground in here to clear out some of the underbrush just in case this fire were to get there. But that's a long ways to go, and overall, our conditions are still looking pretty good that I wouldn't expect us to go that far when it comes to our fire growth. So structure-wise, I'd say looking pretty good. Now, let's actually see what it looks like on the ground. I would imagine we're not really going to be able to see much in this imagery right here, because based on the satellite imagery, just looks like all that smoke is settling over the fire. And based on right here, yeah, can't really see how much activity is going on. I think I started this one thought like 10 minutes ago, and then I've just gone on 5 different tangents since then. But I believe I was trying to say there's 2 different things that can happen with all this smoke over the fire. One could be like what happened a couple days ago, where we had so much smoke that it actually reduced the amount of sunlight that we picked up throughout the day. And then with less sunlight, we had less winds and less up canyon winds. And it was almost like a protective shield. It just kept the fire cooler and calmer than it otherwise would have been. And because we had so much smoke, just calmed down fire behavior, and we barely had any growth. Now, the other thing that can happen is that's the winds pick up, that smoke clears out, or the fire starts to break through the inversion, and then the mosquito fire just starts to take off. So as of right now, I don't yet know how to forecast whether the fire is going to start breaking through that inversion, or if we're going to have the right conditions to clear out all the smoke. That is something that I plan on doing an interview with maybe Neil LaRoe or another fire weather expert who actually has like a PhD in this kind of stuff, to ask them how they would predict that kind of event. Because right now, just looking at it, I would say it could go either way today. And I think that's something that I'm just going to be watching throughout the entire day. And if it does break through that inversion and things start to really pick up, I'll definitely be doing some posts on Twitter about that. And then, because I'm working again at KSBW until 7 o'clock tonight, and then I will be able to do more videos after 7 talking about today's growth. So right there, looks pretty nice right now. We have a lot of smoke out there, so not nice for air quality, but that is good when it comes to fire behavior. Now let's actually check out the weather forecast. So I think we've kind of figured out what's going on the mosquito fire right now. Most of the growth, once again, expected to be towards this eastern section. Successful firing operations in the north and around Forest Hill, so we're looking pretty good in those areas. And then minimal growth the last 2 days because of cool, moist conditions. Now let's see what the weather forecast is going to be like over the next few days, so that we can forecast what this fire is going to do in the future. So let's click into Forest Hill here. This is a weather station we've been using for quite some time, so we might as well just stay consistent. Looks like it's only 62 degrees right now, so we're off to another below average weather day when it comes to temperatures. And I know we had really great relative humidity recoveries overnight, which means we had a lot of moisture. And that helped to also calm down some of the fire activity and also allowed them to do that firing operation. Temperatures right now, 62. Relative humidity is 58. And look at that 0 mile per hour winds. So that explains why all that smoke was able to settle down to the surface. We have no wind whatsoever on this fire. And that can sometimes work in a positive feedback loop where you don't have wind, so smoke settles down. And then because you have so much smoke, you don't warm up, so then your winds don't pick up. And then that smoke allows the winds to continue to settle down. So that's where fires can actually... There are cases where fires run in positive feedback loops in the direction you don't want them to. For example, if you get a lot of rising motion because the fire is very active, then it starts to pull in winds in all different directions to fill that vacuum. And then the fire just starts spreading like crazy in all sorts of directions. So that's a bad positive feedback loop for a fire. Right now, it looks like we're in that more positive feedback loop. I'll put it that way. So right now, conditions looking great. But the big question mark is what they're going to look like throughout the day today. So it looks like we lost our latitude and longitude on here. So let's go to InciWeb. Let's get the latitude and longitude of the fire. Let's put it in here. And let's see what our weather forecast is looking like throughout the day today. So that's interesting. Right off the bat, the forecast model is wrong. So right now that's saying a 29% relative humidity for our fire. And if we actually look at a weather station on the ground, we're at 58%. Now that could be because of key differences among the fire. For example, that's not exactly on Forest Hill. Let's put it directly on Forest Hill. Now it shows 32%. But again, right now the model is over predicting how dry we're going to be throughout the day. And the reason I think it's over predicting is because it's most likely under predicting how much smoke we have over this fire. That smoke is blocking the sunlight warming up our fire right now, and with cooler temperatures, you end up having more moisture. You dry out less. So I think right there we've figured out a little flaw in the models already, and that's something that we have to think about when we look at what it says for this afternoon. So when we get to 4 p.m., or that's 5 p.m., but close enough, the model's saying that our relative humidity is going to get down to 26%. Now, just based on what we just learned, I wouldn't exactly say we can go with that number because we have so much smoke over the fire that that's going to diminish a lot of the heating that we get today. With less heating, we dry out less. So, and we've already seen that the model's not figuring that out well. So I would be surprised if we actually get down to 26%. If we do get down to that, though, it's going to be a more active fire day today than yesterday. But that's a big if right there. So what we can do is go to InciWeb and look at the Mosquito fire. Let's see what they're actually expecting throughout the day today. So onshore flow pattern continues. Skies were mostly clear Thursday night. Winds were light down canyon, light southeast on ridges. An inversion developed around midnight. That's that inversion that's trapping in all of that heat right now. And temperatures were again cool in the low 50s and humidity recovery moderate up to 70%. So that means we increased in moisture overnight and that helped to calm the fire down. So here's the big question mark. Friday, southwest winds continue but decrease in intensity from 4 to 7 miles per hour with gusts to 13. So they're expecting less winds throughout the day today. What that's going to help is that smoke staying over the fire and kind of just protecting us from that fire taking off versus those clear sky days when the fire did start taking off and we had that big spot fire near Forest Hill. Now, temperatures and humidity levels remain similar to previous days. So right there, I think that just answers our question because the models is saying we're going to be twice as dry as yesterday, but the model is not taking into account that smoke. So what InciWeb is saying is that the last couple days we've been cool and moist, and they're expecting that exactly the same today. Now here's where we get to the future. A cold system will bring increased southwest winds on Saturday, gusting up to 25 miles per hour over ridges. Temperatures will trend cooler and humidity higher. There is a chance of rain showers starting Sunday into midweek with wetting rain expected. Over a quarter of an inch total is possible. So that's where we get into the future. So let's go to Saturday because we can't really trust today. Looks like they have the humidity at about 32% on Saturday, so that's more than the model was predicting for today. But that's going to be very dependent on how much smoke we have. And then temperature-wise, low 70s, so that's below average conditions again right there. Big question mark is when it comes to wind gusts. So let's go through the day Saturday because we just saw what they're expecting wind-wise today. Gusts up to 13 miles per hour. That's not too bad right there. It's actually pretty good. And the reason winds are important on a fire is for a few reasons. One, it can clear out that smoke, which gives you clearer skies, which allows the fire to heat up more. Two, it actually just provides more oxygen to the fire. For example, if you put a glass upside down over a candle, pretty soon it runs out of oxygen and that flame goes out. So winds can also push in more oxygen. The other thing that I can do is literally just push the fire forward. And then finally, and most importantly, what winds can do is pick up little burning embers and drop those out ahead of the major blaze and lead to spot fires. So those are kind of the reasons that winds, I would say, are usually the biggest factor to watch when you're trying to forecast how active a fire is going to be throughout the day. If you have very strong winds, most likely your fire activity is going to be picking up. So that's where the concern comes in on Saturday. So to put this in perspective, we've got this trough, the same trough that's actually been cooling us down the last few days and has been good news for our fire behavior. That's going to be moving into California. Now when it does, you might notice something about all these lines that you see on this map. Those lines are isobars, lines of constant pressure. When those are very far apart, you could think of your atmosphere as almost like a flat hill. So let's throw some snow on that flat hill. And if you were on a sled and you tried to slide down this atmosphere right now, you would go very slowly. And you right now being the wind. As this trough gets closer, those lines get a lot closer together. And that's almost like your snowy hill is getting steeper. And now when you're on that sled, you're going to start flying down that hill. And that, because your atmosphere is getting steeper, so your winds are going to be faster. Because your winds just flow with pressure. So clicking through here, that's kind of a generalization, but for the most part. So clicking through here Saturday as that trough is coming in and our snowy hill is getting steeper, that's where we get up to 29 mile per hour winds right there. Yeah. Yesterday, they was actually saying 31, so right now it looks better than the forecast models were saying yesterday, but clearly winds picking up. Now, if you look at the direction those winds are coming from, that's going to generally tell you the direction that the fire is going to move. Looks like it's a lot more southerly than the last couple of days. So that's going to, I'd say the area that I'm forecasting the most growth on Saturday is going to be this section of the fire right here. Because we have this activity right here, and those winds are going to try to push this fire towards the north. Now, the reason I also say it's that area is when we look at fire history, a lot of unburnt, dry fuels that haven't been burned in a really long time. Those strong winds are going to try to push that fire forward right there. Now, the top place that I'm going to be watching, though, is this northern section. And I think I'd love to talk to somebody on the ground about this, but I would imagine part of the reason they're doing so much work on this northern section with all these firing operations, so all that heat that you see right there isn't just the fire going crazy, it's actually them putting fire on the ground to clear out some of the fuels, because when this wind event comes in, it's going to try to push this fire towards the north. Now, my big concern is that something happens like what we saw in the Dixie fire, where they had an amazing firing operation, really covering almost the entire northern section of this one part of the fire. I think the firing operation was like 10 miles long or something. But then our winds picked up one day, took a burning ember, tossed it over where they'd cleared out the fuels, and then the Dixie fire took off 15 miles in one day. So that's the main thing that I'm worried about on Saturday, is kind of embers escaping right here and the fire taking off. Now, with that being said, I watched that CAL FIRE report this morning, and they were saying that they're feeling pretty confident on this northern edge, and you can kind of see why. They have the 2013 American fire right there, and then they've been doing all of these firing operations on this northern side as well, where if you have some activity, like right here, and those southerly winds push it forward, boom, fuels have been cleared out. If you still have some activity right here, pushes forward, fuels have been cleared out. Then, on this entire side over here, that's the burn scar, so it's going to already be moving slower in that area as well. With all that being said, you can see how much fuel we have over here. So the last thing we want is a burning ember to drop there and have the fire take off, and then all of a sudden it's in all of this steep terrain where that would probably just be a nightmare to try to put in dozer lines and that kind of stuff over there. So makes sense that they're doing so much amazing work on that northern side to reduce the possibility that something like that happens. So I'll just we'll check out the chance of rain in a second. First, I want to look at Robert's comment right here, one of our great moderators. He says, what's your opinion on the smoke study for contamination and such? I actually don't know about that smoke study, but if you have a link to that, I would love to check that out, because I know I talked to one professor at San Jose State who was studying that. He was actually a chemist, and he was going into like the ash that would fall from fires, and he was finding all kinds of dangerous chemicals in it, because and this was on the CZU Lightning Complex in Santa Cruz, because when a structure burns, you think about all the different chemicals that are in your house. You have laundry detergent, you have just all sorts of plastics, lots of different things. And then when all that burns, goes up into the air, and then when you have something like last night and all your winds die down, all of those particles then just settle back down to the surface. So you're breathing in a lot more than just smoke. I'll put it that way. Or vegetation. Now, one good thing I would say on this fire is we've avoided a lot of the structures being burned that could have been burned on this one. So obviously that's number one, a good news, because the first thing that you don't want is to lose lives. Second thing you don't want is to lose structures. But then third, you don't want to lose structures because of the chemicals that then go in the smoke. But when you look at this fire perimeter, there were numerous places around this fire, especially when that spot fire was taking off towards Forest Hill, where right at the last second, they were able to stop it in its tracks before it took out all those structures and destroyed the structures, which is terrible, but then also contaminated that smoke more. So now, let's finally check out that rain event. So first, when this trough moves into California, it's going to be bad for the Mosquito fire because it's going to increase the winds. So we're going to be watching the fire very closely on Saturday. I might do a very extended Wildfire Insider that day where we just watch it throughout the afternoon. Haven't exactly decided yet though, because I've been working a lot of days straight, so we'll see. But yeah, Saturday looks to be not the best day on this fire. But then once we get through that, that's where some of the good news starts to come in. That's where this trough turns into what you would call a cutoff low. See how when you go back to here, it's all kind of connected. It almost looks like, I don't know, like a big smiley face or something. And then it turns into what you call a cutoff low, and it actually breaks off of itself, and it moves off of the coast of California. Now, in that low, you have a lot of moisture that actually came from, I think it's called Typhoon Merbok. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But there was a typhoon off in the Pacific. A lot of that moisture got sucked into this trough in this low, and now it's going to be moving off of the coast of California. Now, the great news for us is all that moisture in that low, when it moves off the coast of California, looks like it's going to be bringing some rainfall to the state. And this is going to be different than some of the other rainfall that we've been picking up over the last few months. So over the last few months, we'll occasionally have monsoonal activity where Arizona's getting a bunch of thunderstorms and rain, even some flooding, and then something shifts in the atmosphere and all that moisture starts rushing into California. We get some thunderstorms and we pick up a little bit of rain. And it's coming from the south, and it's kind of tropical moisture. And with that, it's usually very scattered thunderstorms, and at best, you get a few hundredths of an inch. This is not that. So it's not one of those monsoonal systems coming up from the south. This is more like what you would think about like a classic winter storm. It's not a big winter storm or an atmospheric river or anything like that, but it's coming from that direction. It's coming down from the northwest, so it's associated with cold air. Instead of sometimes those southerly systems can be warm, that's where you get the really bad thunderstorms, like what we saw in 2020, where we sparked off the LNU, the CZU, the SCU lightning complex wildfires because we had warm air and moisture moving in at the same time, created thunderstorms all over the state of California and sparked hundreds of lightning fires. This one is associated with cold air, and you can actually tell because of that blue color in there. So as that comes in, has a bunch of moisture, and it's going to be what is our first like proper rain in a very long time. So it's not just scattered thunderstorms. This is an actual rain system. Let's look at the timing on it. So it looks like it starts to come in as early as Saturday night. So about 11 p.m. Saturday, we're starting to get some of that rain. Then some of the more moderate rain starts to move in on Sunday morning. So moderate rain is where you see that yellow color. The lighter green color is just going to be your light rain. And then, so moderate rain still filling in 11 a.m. on Sunday. All right, so right there, actually every time I look at these rain models, it starts to look better for the Mosquito fire. So before, on the Mosquito fire, when I first looked at the rain models and I heard about this system coming in, there was almost no rain expected for the Mosquito fire. Now it looks like we might have a couple showers as early as 8 a.m. on Sunday, which is earlier than the models were saying yesterday. Possibly true around 11 a.m. on Sunday. 2 p.m., the model is more confidently showing some rain over the Mosquito fire. So we get into 5 p.m. on Sunday, looks like some more of that. And then even going into 2 p.m. on Monday, still looks like we're getting some rain over the Mosquito fire, and then it's gone. I think that jumps back to the start of the model. So the end of the model looks like we're still getting some rain over the Mosquito fire, and we can actually click on a longer model because that's not telling us the whole picture. I want to see the exact timing of this event. So rain starts to come in 8 p.m. Saturday to 11 p.m. Saturday for the Bay Area. We start to see our first rain over the Mosquito fire maybe at 2 p.m. This is a different model. Oh, that makes sense. The models update. So 2 p.m. on Sunday, and then it looks like that rain, some moderate rain, 11 a.m. on Monday, and then it looks like it's still going as late as 5 p.m. on Tuesday. So that's something we didn't see yesterday. Now it's saying the rain's going to stick around longer than originally. And then still maybe getting some rain into 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 5 p.m. on Wednesday. And then it's finally gone on Thursday. So that's what I was talking about. Every time we look at these models, they seem to get better for our rainfall on the Mosquito fire. So let's just look at totals right here as it all comes through. Yeah, this is looking better than the model was yesterday. Yesterday we were just seeing very, very light, almost grayish color, which was like 1/100th of an inch or something. Now it looks like we're into that green color, which is between 0.2 and 0.3 inches. And I think that's actually the exact same thing that InsiWeb was saying, over 1/4 of an inch possible. So how do we put that in perspective? Now with rain coming in, it's unlikely that it just completely puts the fire out, but it's certainly going to help. And overall, when you get one of these systems coming through, it's also just going to increase the moisture in the atmosphere. So we're not only just going to be feeling the positive benefits from the 1/4 of an inch that we might get, we're also feeling the positive benefits from the added moisture into the atmosphere, because when the air has more moisture goes into the fuels, and then the fire spreads more slowly. So for example, Saturday, the model is saying 32% relative humidity. Let's see what it looks like on Sunday. 43%. On Monday, 72% at the peak of the afternoon. So even if we weren't to get any rain on this fire, that increase in humidity is going to be enough to calm the fire down significantly. So overall, I would say that's a lot of great news, and good news and bad news for the mosquito fire. The bad news is that as this system is coming in, it's going to be bringing those gusty winds right there that we're going to have to watch throughout the day Saturday. The good news is that after that system does come in, it's going to be bringing some rain, which will hopefully help us out on the mosquito fire. And I would say it will help us out. So let's go back to the map and just based on the information we found, make a little forecast for today. I would say, so yesterday, my prediction was that today was going to be worse than yesterday, because the model was showing that this afternoon we were going to get drier. So the model was saying that we were going to be a little warmer and we're going to have humidity back into the 20s. Based on what we're seeing right now and how much smoke we have just settled over this fire, and when we looked at the weather station on the ground that said 0 mile/hour winds, which is going to allow that smoke to continue to settle there, I'm actually going to change my forecast and say we are less active throughout the day today than yesterday, because it looks like temperature and humidity now, even though the model says we're getting drier, it now looks like we're actually going to be about the same as yesterday, and winds are actually expected to be a little less than yesterday. So I see somebody just posted in here, aren't there different winds at different altitudes? Is it only ground level winds that matter? So that's a really good question. So I can answer that first one for sure. Aren't there different winds at different altitudes? That is, yes, guaranteed that is true. Typically, you get stronger winds. It's kind of hard to put like a steadfast rule on this, because sometimes you can get winds that rush through canyons, but a lot of times your winds will actually be stronger the higher you go up, because the surface provides friction, which slows the winds down. That's why sometimes in cities you have less winds than in like a flat plain, because as the wind is trying to get through that city, it's bumping into all the buildings and it has more friction and it's slowing it down. So usually you'll have stronger winds the higher you go up in the atmosphere. Now your next question, is it only ground level winds that matter? So that is another great one. I should probably do an interview with one of my advisors at San Jose State, like Craig Clements or Patrick Brown. They would be the experts to be able to answer that question. Overall though, so I will try to interview them soon and then ask them that question, but I would say, is it only ground level winds that matter? That would be no. So ground level winds are very important, but upper level winds might actually be more important, because it's those upper level winds that often will be able to clear out the smoke and lead to one of those clear days that picked up our activity. We saw the effects of that on the mosquito fire, where upper level winds picked up. It basically just increased the ventilation to the fire, and then we had a lot more activity. The other thing those upper level winds can do is, if you have a big smoke plume and it's picking up all those burning embers and it's going up into the atmosphere, the upper level winds carry those burning embers and can drop them out as far away as 1 to 2 miles away from the fire. So yeah, upper level winds definitely important, and you actually just reminded me that I forgot to show the Wharf S-Fire model. So this is what we run out of San Jose State. And this does take into account the upper level winds. So on the ground where you see these arrows, those are the surface winds. But this does also take into account what the upper level winds are doing and how that interacts with the fire. So definitely important there. Today, the model is forecasting those same kind of southwesterly winds in the afternoon. You notice how the winds turn around as you get into the afternoon. And then it is forecasting some growth right there. That's just a perfect animation of how winds lead to fire spread. As they turn around, turn southwest, then you start to get that growth towards the northeast. Now the big thing that I'm worried about though is on Saturday, we're going to have very strong southerly winds. So that's going to try to push this fire more towards the north. So I see comment again. I would assume that stronger high level winds would clear the smoke, which would lead to higher fire activity. Yeah, so that's exactly what we saw on the Mosquito fire, and that's why that's one of the reasons that I like doing these update and forecast videos. The first reason I do it is because, well, I started doing these update and forecast videos when I was living in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and on one side of me I had the CZU lightning complex. On the other side of me I had the SCU lightning complex. There was literally ash falling all over the cabin that I was living in, and I couldn't find any useful information. It seemed like all the information I was finding was just kind of scary, but there wasn't anybody saying like, hey, this is where the fire is, this is where it's going in the future, so you should either evacuate now or get ready to evacuate, or maybe you don't actually have anything to worry about because the fire is going in the opposite direction of where you live. I couldn't find any of that information, so I'm getting my master's in meteorology at San Jose State with an emphasis in the environmental factors that drive extreme wildfire behavior. And as I've been doing my research, I've been learning a whole bunch of stuff. I also know all these different kind of links where you can find very useful wildfire information. So I figured nobody else is doing this. I could just compile all this information myself and make my own report that's not only going to help me, but hopefully help other people. So that's the number one reason I make these update and forecast videos. Number two is because one of my main goals is to become a better communicator, and I'm talking for about 48 minutes now, so this is great practice in communication. And then the third reason is it's actually the best way to learn about wildfire. So I'm looking over on my desk right now, and I have maybe 5 or 6 wildfire books that I've been reading, and they're really good books. I learn a ton from them, but I don't feel like I actually learn it until I see the ideas applied to a wildfire itself. So I think in one of my books, I read that smoke over a fire, if it settles down and there's calm winds, that can reduce fire activity, but when winds pick up, the smoke clears out and fire activity increases. I read that in my book and it makes sense, but I didn't really learn it until I've seen it on fires, and the Mosquito fire was just another example where that came true, where smoke picked up, winds calmed down. We had a couple very calm days, and then winds picked up, pushed the smoke out, clear skies, we had very active days. So it's looking at all the different factors each day and then seeing how the fire changes, which makes me be able to better forecast in the future how the fire is going to change. And I'm in no way perfect because there's a lot I still have to learn, but this is just a great way to learn because it's almost like looking at factors, making a guess, and then seeing if that guess is right, and then adjusting how you look at factors in the future. And this is now my 3rd year of doing this, and I've already learned a lot, so I just imagine there's going to be a lot more for me to learn as I continue to do this, most likely for the next few decades. So I see a couple more comments in here. We have lived in Napa during the 2 recent fires, 2017. Totally understand that feeling of lack of information. Yeah, that was definitely one of the big reasons that I started doing this. And I'm also a broadcast meteorologist at KSBW on the Central Coast, and that's actually something that I've been trying to do for when I work at the news as well, is I take kind of everything I've been talking about here in 50 minutes, and I'll try to condense it as well as I can into like 1 or 2 minute wildfire packages for our news station. So see another comment thing here. One thing that would be interesting is if it is possible to simulate wildfire activity and its impact on winds. Like if a fire is really hot, it creates winds itself, which would impact fire spread. So that's a great point right there. And you've actually been doing some great comments. I'm going to add you to our moderating team. So with that, it's a nice responsibility. Robert and Lucy are kind of our lead moderators, but I like this chat when it's just about kind of wildfire comments and questions. So if you ever see anything that's like blatantly spammy or just like, I don't know, inflammatory that isn't about wildfire, then feel free to clear those comments out. But so what you were just saying in this comment, is it possible for winds, for there to be a simulation that basically accounts for how wildfire can impact itself and the weather around it? And that's actually what makes this model that we run out of San Jose State so amazing, is it's one of the few models in the world that is actually able to figure out how the wildfire is impacting the weather and then how that weather is going to impact the wildfire. So for example, I think it was on the Dixie fire last year, but there was one day where the fire, or where the model was simulating that the fire was going to become very active on like the eastern side. Now normally just a model that's just based on model wind would just show, oh, southwesterly winds throughout the day, that's just going to push the fire towards the northeast. But what this model actually did was said there's going to be so much fuel burning that we're going to have so much vertical motion that we're going to get all these winds rushing in, and it's actually going to create almost like a little circulation around that, and we're going to get a ton of erratic winds pushing the fire in all directions. So it's how the wildfire was creating its own weather, and then what do you know? That exact same thing ended up happening. So yeah, that's what makes this model so great right here, is it's one of the few models in the world that actually accounts for how the wildfire is going to affect the weather and then how that weather is going to impact the wildfire. So yeah, I think I have a meeting about in 10 minutes about actually taking my master's thesis, which takes extreme or environmental factors and uses machine learning to predict extreme wildfire days. And right now we're trying to take my research and actually turn it into our own operational model, where we'll have like a map of California that shows your probability of having an extreme fire day. So, and I have a meeting for that in about 5 minutes about getting that operational out of San Jose State. So I do have to go right now, but I will be back. Well, I'll be here throughout the day on Twitter, posting about any activity that might be picking up. For example, key thing I'm going to be watching is if this smoke just leads to very calm behavior today, or if we end up breaking the inversion and we get some active behavior. I'll keep you guys posted about that on Twitter. And then at 7 o'clock, I'll be done with the evening news, and I'll do kind of a 10 to 20 minute video on the Mosquito fire, and then another 2-minute kind of concise video on the Mosquito fire. So thank you for all the great questions and comments throughout the day today. I will be back tonight, and then I'll also be back for another one of these Wildfire Insiders tomorrow morning. So I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.